Get out of this house right now if you don't want a divorce. My husband James said this to me out of the blue. I was shocked. It seemed like he was sure I wouldn't actually file for divorce, so he was trying to scare me. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to talk to someone for advice. My name is Anna. I'm 30 years old and work in an office. My husband James and I are about to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary, but we still don't have any children. This makes my mother-in-law constantly ask us when she'll get grandchildren. She lives off the money my late father-in-law left behind, and her constant nagging about kids is really stressing me out. James used to be very kind when we were dating, but since we got married, he's changed. He decided we should live near his childhood home without asking me. I'm often sent to his parents' house to do all the housework without any breaks. They either go out or stay home watching TV and laughing, while I'm criticized for making too much noise with a vacuum cleaner. After that, I was told to clean with a broom and a rag instead. Things got worse when my sister-in-law moved back in. She recently returned from another town because of some issues there. She has a 4-year-old daughter and expects me to make her lunch every day. When I say I can't because of my job, my mother-in-law scolds me, saying my sister-in-law is dealing with a divorce and needs help. James tells me I should want to help the family, and my sister-in-law says it's good practice for when I have a child of my own, so I should be grateful. So now, I wake up at 4 a.m. every day to make breakfast and a lunchbox for my niece, then head back to my own place to do my housework before going to work. This is my exhausting daily routine, and James doesn't help with any of the chores. The only time I get to rest is during my breaks at work. One day, after living this exhausting routine for a while, my husband dropped a bomb on me. "Oh, by the way, Anna, you should quit your job." "What?" I asked, confused. "I've talked it over with my mom and sister. You know she's going through a rough time, you understand, right?" "No, I don't get what you're saying." "Listen," he snapped. "I mean quit your job and take care of the house," he said before storming off to take a bath. I couldn't understand the connection between my sister-in-law's divorce and me quitting my job. My husband has a dead-end job, and there are months when I earn more than him. Does he really think we could live off his salary alone? Neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law work, so why can't they handle the housework? Feeling like I couldn't take any more, I grabbed my car keys and drove to the one place that came to mind, my childhood home. It's a bit far from where we live now, and since my parents moved overseas, no one lives there. Because my parents tend to worry, I couldn't bring myself to talk to them about what was happening. Whenever something bad happened, I would come here, to my home filled with precious memories. As I was lost in my thoughts, my phone rang. It was my husband. "Hey, I just got out of the bath and you're gone. Are you at your parents' place again?" "Yes, so what? Could you stop running back home every time something goes wrong? We're not kids." My husband loves my parents' house, but his words didn't make me feel any better. "I'll be working from here for a while, and no, I won't go to your parents' house either," I said. "Well, come back home now," my husband demanded. Feeling defeated by his forcefulness, I returned to our house. After that, I quit my beloved job in the fashion industry. My clueless coworkers thought I might be pregnant. At home, I was given no free time and had to manage the household all day. Even when I caught a cold and had a high fever, no one seemed to care. I had become a servant in my own home, a slave, to be blunt. However, one day something unexpected happened. My sister-in-law announced she was getting remarried, and her fiancé was an executive at a major corporation with a substantial income. It was quite a shock. My sister-in-law isn't particularly attractive, and her personality isn't great either, but I guess everyone has their preferences. The whole in-law family was celebrating, excited about how she was marrying into money. My sister-in-law, full of pride, showed me a photo of the man. As I looked at the picture, my husband said something unbelievable. "Because of this, Anna, your parents' house will become my sister's family place." "Wait a minute, that house was left to me by my parents. You don't get to decide that," I protested. "The whole family has decided. You, who live off my money, don't have a say in this," he replied. Was the person standing in front of me a devil in human form? That house was meant for me, a place to live if I ever had children. James knew this, so how could he be so selfish? My heart was at its breaking point. To make things worse, my mother-in-law added, "You can't even give us a grandchild, so at least be useful around the house." There was no one on my side in this house. I went back to my parents' home, packed a few belongings, and made a firm decision. I would never go back to my husband's house. A few days later, with no calls from my husband, I thought maybe he had reconsidered. Then suddenly the doorbell rang. It was my husband and sister-in-law. "What are you doing here?" I asked. We thought we should take a look around, my sister-in-law said, barging in despite my pleas for them to stop. They ignored me and snooped around the house, treating me as if I were invisible. This house is pretty nice. Fit for you, Anna, she said. And when do you plan to move out of this house, Anna? My sister's wedding is coming up soon. Get it together, my husband said. I stayed silent, but then he added, if you don't want a divorce, leave now. He was so sure I wouldn't actually go through with a divorce, and he was grinning with my sister-in-law, feeling confident. Got it, I said. My husband seemed pleased, like that was all he wanted to hear. They were planning a long family-only trip under the excuse of celebrating my sister-in-law's wedding. Of course, I wasn't invited. My husband told me to pack up and leave before they got back, then he and my sister-in-law left, looking all excited. As I watched them leave, I allowed myself a small, humorless smile. 2 weeks later, the day my in-laws were supposed to return from their trip, my phone started ringing nonstop from morning. It was my husband calling, and there were also calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Finally, I picked up the phone. Hey Anna, where the hell are you? My husband shouted. I'm at home, I replied. Liar, you're not at the apartment or your parents' place. And what's the meaning of this? What are you talking about? I asked. Your family house, there's a for sale sign. Yeah, I put it up for sale, I said calmly. What? What are you talking about? He yelled. Well, after you all left, I gave it some thought. The house you're in now just seems so dirty. I like things to be clean after all. Oh, and by the way, I'm divorcing you. Don't mess with me, he screamed. That was going to be my line. Let's talk to our lawyers from now on, I said, ending the conversation. I hung up on him while he was still shouting. On the day my husband and sister-in-law returned, I had already been in touch with someone, a friend of my father's who runs a real estate company. I didn't know anything about selling houses, but he kindly advised me, and we managed to strike a pretty good deal. As a side note, the apartment we had been living in was under my name since my husband couldn't pass the screening process. Of course, since I had no intention of living there anymore, I canceled the lease while they were away and sent all of my husband's belongings to his parents' house, cash on delivery. Even afterward, I kept getting calls from my in-laws, which I ignored completely. I recorded all the unbearable messages they left on my voicemail. According to my lawyer, my husband was hesitating even though he had said he wanted a divorce. It seems he didn't want to lose his maid. I thought it would be a long battle, but then my husband suddenly agreed to the divorce. From what my lawyer told me, my husband, mother-in-law, and sister-in-law abruptly showed up at his office, saying they would divorce me and to process it quickly. My husband had been reluctant about the divorce, but my mother-in-law told him that since my sister-in-law's new husband was rich, they could hire a new housekeeper with money and get rid of the barren wife to get a younger, newer one. With that, my husband agreed to the divorce. Moreover, they offered to pay a small settlement on the condition that I would not get involved with them any longer. I thought that was supposed to be my line, but I decided to accept what was offered. Not long after, my sister-in-law got remarried. For a while after that, life was quiet. Taking care of myself was so much easier than I thought. I deeply regretted not divorcing sooner. Well, I'm finally free. Time to enjoy my new life. Just as I was beginning to embrace this thought, something happened. Out of nowhere, my in-laws showed up at my new home. The moment I opened the door, they barged in, and my ex-husband demanded, "We need to talk. Sit down." Despite wondering who they thought they were, I took a seat. Then he said, "Come back home, we forgive you." Unable to close my gaping mouth, I answered, "Excuse me?" I wanted them to leave immediately, so I teased, "Oh, are you talking about your sister's husband? Has he disappeared?" The three of them widened their eyes as if to say, "How do you know about that?" and stared at me. "What do you know? Say something," my ex-husband insisted. After we registered our marriage, he suddenly disappeared. "We can't contact him," the mother-in-law added with a hint of desperation. On top of that, he ran off with her family's fortune. "Was this your doing? You've brought us such terrible fortune, daughter-in-law," she accused, looking as if she would attack me at any moment. Tired of their baseless accusations, I decided to reveal a truth to them. "Wow, I didn't know your sister liked hamburgers so much." "What? What are you talking about hamburgers all of a sudden? Don't you know, your sister's husband isn't some executive at a major company. He's just a part-timer at a hamburger shop." Hearing this, my sister-in-law froze, at a loss for words. I continued my story. In my single days, my friend and I loved visiting different hamburger shops. There was one favorite spot where a certain employee always made mistakes and got yelled at by the manager. "That man happened to be your husband," I said, directing my gaze at my sister-in-law. Since I started dating my husband, he told me no more hamburgers, so I had given up my hobby. But when I saw your husband's picture in the background of the shop's homepage, I recognized him immediately. I decided it wasn't my place to interfere and stayed silent. I pulled up the shop's homepage on my phone and showed it to her. She stared intently at the image, her husband's face unmistakably in the background. By the way, I visited the shop recently with a friend, but your husband was no longer there. He probably left town. That's marriage fraud, she stammered, her face paling. It seems that's what they call it. I'm sorry for your loss. My mother-in-law, who had been silent until now, suddenly erupted. You knew and you didn't tell us. We took care of you, who can't even have children, for years. You owe us. At her nonsensical rant, I decided to reveal another truth I had been keeping. First of all, I'm not the reason we couldn't have kids. Maybe my ex-husband can let you in on that. My mother-in-law looked at her son in shock, and he guiltily looked down. When we couldn't conceive after our marriage, we decided to get tested, at your insistence, actually. There was nothing wrong with me, but your son had a very low sperm count. The doctor told us he was the reason we couldn't have kids. But when you asked about the test results, your son instantly lied and said that I was the problem. I was angry, but you just said nonsensical things like, you have to support your husband, refusing to face the truth. My ex-husband joined forces with you, pinning all the blame on me in the end. Look, I admit I was wrong, my ex-husband said, trying to salvage the situation. Once the house sells, we'll get a good chunk of money, right? Let's all live happily as a family again. Well, we've been through a lot, but let's get along from now on, my mother-in-law chimed in, clearly desperate. It was at that moment I realized they probably came here today with the intention of getting their hands on my money. What a disgusting lot. No chance I'm getting back together with you, and I don't consider any of you family. Upon hearing this, my ex-husband retorted, getting a little big for your boots now, aren't you? I know even if you sold the house, you hardly have any savings. How do you plan to survive? It seems he had sneaked a peek at my bank account during my single days, and now he had this smug look on his face as if to say, now that you know, do as you're told. To poke fun at my situation, the three of them were smirking at me, so I decided to enlighten them with a little truth. You know, I was surprised when you mentioned my bank account, I began, my tone calm but sharp. You must have thought you had me cornered, but what you don't realize is that I made some very smart investments before we got married. That money you saw, it's just a fraction of what I actually have. Their smirks faltered. While you were off on your little escapades, I was building a future for myself. I own several properties now, and I've got more than enough savings to live comfortably without any of you. So no, I don't need to get back together with you, and I certainly don't need your money. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like you to leave. The shock on their faces was almost comical. They had come here expecting to bully me into submission, but they were the ones who were leaving empty-handed. As they stumbled out, still trying to process what had just happened, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Finally, I was free. My savings aren't that much, I said, to which my ex-husband smugly replied, see? I told you so. But then I added, instead, I've invested in stocks enough to live comfortably without working for the next few years at least. Their faces dropped in disbelief as they stared at me. Actually, since I was a child, my father was into stocks and investments. He had a talent for predicting trends, and I inherited those skills, building up a decent amount of wealth. The money that helped my parents move abroad came from my successful investments. I kept this a secret from my money-hungry ex-family. Seeing their disappointed faces, I said, you can leave now. Oh, and remember our divorce agreement. If we approach each other without a valid reason, there's a penalty. Are you going to pay, or should I call the police for trespassing? The mention of the police scared them off, and they left in a hurry. I immediately consulted my lawyer about what happened, and he advised me to contact him if they tried to approach me again. As expected, once my ex-husband knew I had money, he bombarded me with messages begging to reconcile, sending nostalgic photos of places we had dated and even creepy messages like, I'm here right now, thinking about those days. It happened almost daily. I thought about blocking him but decided to keep everything as evidence, just in case. I wonder how he had time to text me all day while supposedly working, but I didn't really care. However, when he started trying to contact my friends, I decided enough was enough. I sent him a message saying, I'll go to the police if this continues, and included a photo of our divorce agreement and the nearest police station. After that, the messages stopped, and I never heard from my ex-husband again. Later, my lawyer informed me that my ex-husband had planned to live off his sister's new husband, and had even quit his job when she remarried. He was foolish for leaving a decent job at a decent company. Around the same time, I had another request with a lawyer, unrelated to this. After we got married, I noticed something was off. My personal belongings started disappearing. First a necklace I bought myself, then a fountain pen my parents gave me as a job starting present, along with bags, rings, and more. The fountain pen was especially precious to me. When I brought this up to my husband, he yelled, "Don't worry about losing things." Growing suspicious, I secretly installed a surveillance camera. What it captured was shocking: my husband and mother-in-law rummaging through my closet with grins on their faces. After my sister-in-law moved in, the footage showed all three of them stealing my things. They were selling my belongings for money, likely after seeing the balance in my bank account. This continued until our divorce, and I made sure to collect plenty of physical evidence. Just when they thought I wouldn't do anything, I filed for damages and compensation for emotional distress caused by their actions. They must be panicking now, but it's all their own fault. As for what happened to the three of them, my sister-in-law's ex-husband found out about the situation and took custody of their daughter. Since my sister-in-law didn't seem to care much for her daughter, I felt relieved. Not long ago, I saw the daughter happily holding hands and shopping with her father. She had a smile on her face, something I never saw when she was with my in-laws. The three of them, who thought they could live comfortably, applied for welfare, but since they were healthy and had no other issues, they were denied. My husband's pride kept him from finding another job, so he eventually went back to his old workplace and begged on his knees. However, they had been hoping he would quit, and they ended up calling the police on him, which he hated. Now he has to work, but he can only find day labor jobs. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were ordered to pay me compensation, so they both started part-time jobs at a nearby supermarket. However, they had never really worked before and are struggling with the unfamiliar tasks. Coincidentally, since they started working there, the supermarket sales have dropped significantly, and they've earned the nickname, the plague-bringing mother and daughter. By the way, their marriage scam is still ongoing. I thought they owned the house they were living in, but it was actually a rental. Unable to pay the rent, the three of them moved to a rundown apartment that's notorious in the neighborhood. Their living conditions are poor, and they're always fighting. Just the other day, the police were called because their arguing was too loud. As for me, thanks to selling the house, I used the money to start a new apparel company with a colleague from my old job. We've been gaining more customers and even getting featured in magazines and on TV. Being able to return to the job I love is the happiest thing for me. Oh, and there's more good news. I've met a wonderful man through work, and we're getting married. His family is very kind and has welcomed me warmly. On top of that, we're expecting a baby, and I'm finally going to be the mother I've always dreamed of being. Right now, I'm the happiest I've ever been.